Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album slash mixtape from Chance the Rapper called Coloring Book. But first, let's talk about faith. Now before I blow open this can of worms, let me start by saying I'm not talking about religion here. My own personal faith is private and complicated and would probably extend over more than just one video, and entangling it in with religion does not make things easier. But that's not to imply that faith doesn't inspire art. More oftentimes it can inspire better art than religion itself. See the vast majority of the Christian music scene. Good art arises from conflict, and a crisis or conflict of faith is often one of the most potent that anyone can have, especially when there's no concrete answer to the questions that are presented. But what about Chance the Rapper, the eternal bright-eyed optimist in modern hip-hop who has ignored major labels and independent labels with aplomb to release free album after free album? Yeah, sure, it's been called a mixtape, but at this point, I doubt Chance the Rapper is going to release anything outside of mixtapes like these. So if I want to cover him at length, it'll involve me breaking my mixtape rule and talking about this. A rule, by the way, that I'm happy to break here. My experience with Chance the Rapper might be kind of uneven. I really liked acid rap, but surf reveals itself as even more messy with every subsequent listen. But if you can get him on a straightforward project, he can spray colorful and relentlessly fun verses like no other. His verse on Kanye West's Ultralight Beam from The Life of Pablo proved that and outshone nearly everybody else on that project. What did worry me was that, again, like Surf, this project might have too many hands in the pot, with an overloaded guest star list and many that you would not expect from a reportedly hip-hop gospel record. But hey, maybe Chance managed to tap into the spiritual side of artists like Lil Wayne and 2 Chainz and Future and Young Thug and Justin Bieber. At the very least, it would force them outside of their comfort zone. So I decided to pick up Coloring Book. What'd I find? Well, this was an interesting listen. Certainly more of a credible stab at blending gospel and rap than what Kanye tried in snippets on The Life of Pablo, and I'd definitely say this record is a stronger release than I expected, but I don't know. While there's a lot to like about this album, outside of certain moments, I'm not as hyped about it as I want to be. It's definitely good. There's more color and personality and cohesion than what we got from Surf, but I can't help but feel that there's something missing that would really drive home this record for me. It's good, but not quite great. So trying to unpack all that, let's start off with Chance the Rapper himself. And really, the majority of what I have to say is glowing. He's a charismatic and expressive rapper, capable of balancing a lighthearted sense of fun with real wordplay. And he's got the versatility to careen across a variety of flows and handle them all pretty well. I'm not gonna say his wordplay is perfect. There are some points where the rhyming can get a little bit sloppy, but he's got a carefree power that humanizes a lot of the gospel touches on this album. And the framing of the gospel material definitely is interesting. Not so much evangelical or placid complacence, but the reality that in the scarred, death-ridden ghettos of Chicago, faith can be something that gives you strength to carry on. I can't fault him for that, and there is dramatic weight here with friends that he has lost. And when you have songs like both versions of Blessings, both the original and the reprise, or How Great, or Angels, or Finish Line Drown, the strength and positivity of his faith is pretty infectious. Even though I did raise my eyebrows at lines like, I don't believe in science, I believe in signs. I mean, I get the subtext, but he definitely could have phrased that a lot better. But what I appreciate is not just how Chance places his faith in context giving his success, being genuinely thankful for all of his blessings, but also being a new father means that greater challenges are yet to come for him, and he's going to rely on his faith all the more. And sure, some of those challenges he's facing now are conventional enough coming from his success. Cronies trying to leech off him on All Night, which he actually downplays, which is a weird fitting on such a bouncy vibe for the song, but then you run into cases where he's moved into a different place than old friends or girls, like on the heartbreaking Same Drugs, or the dance reminiscence of Juke Jam, and there is some power there. That's before we get to cases where the music industry tries to block their artists from collaborating with them, trying to control the uncontrollable, it seems. Now, there is a certain irony in that, given the huge array of guest stars that Chance managed to bring on anyways, and where we encounter our first problem with this album. Mostly that with rare exception, these guest stars don't quite seem to be on the same page with Chance surrounding content or even production, and instead of making them fit with his vision, Chance kind of bends to them. In some cases, it kind of makes sense. No problem rails against the label system and brings on Lil Wayne, who despite a few whack bars has a good verse, but then you have 2 Chainz going off topic and over the top, including how he runs shit like diarrhea. You know, just because you have Lil Wayne on the song doesn't mean you have to get scatological. But then it gets even more pronounced on Mixtape, where he piles on the autotune, and Chance and Lil Yachty both have some good verses lamenting commercialism and hip-hop and the downfall of mixtapes, and then Young Thug doesn't even try to connect with his pretty standard verse at this point, not even all that interesting bars. Or take Smoke Break, where Chance the Rapper is rapping about how their baby son doesn't give he and his girl much time to relax anymore, and then Future uses it as an opportunity to rap about his drug-addled hustle, and again bitch about Sierra. Dude, get over it already, you won joint custody. And then there's Kanye West, who shows up on All We Got. We'll talk about the mess of the production on that song in a bit, but would it have killed you to have not smothered auto-tune all over your hook, Kanye? Or, actually drop a verse? This is an album where we got our annual J Electronica verse of all things, and yeah, it's us on point and full of baiting for the album that we'll never see coming as ever, and yet Kanye couldn't even be bothered for a verse here. Granted, outside of J Electronica, the only other rap verse that stood out for me was No Name on Finish Line Drown, as she continues her winning streak with her plain smoking flow, feeling surprisingly raw after that transition. It really connected for me. And as for singers, well, for the most part, Chance the Rapper handled the hooks himself, but I need to draw attention to Saba matching the energy on Angels, following up his great performance on Surf yet again, and for a low-key outro from Jeremiah on Summer Friends that hit me surprisingly hard. It's a good small moment there that I really did like. But beyond that, we've got to talk about the production and the instrumentation, where Surf stumbled big, and I wish I could say that the inconsistent production problems didn't show up here as well. Unfortunately, they do. And while it's nowhere near as bad, the mixing immediately starts off rough on All We Got, where Chance's verse seems fine against the trumpet and sparse beat until the squonking, thicker horns begin lumbering in, and Kanye's heavily auto-tuned hook is entirely too loud against the rest of the mix. I don't doubt that it was on purpose, but it's way too clumsy in order to connect properly. But then again, clumsiness might as well be a motif for this album. And again, it's not always a bad thing. Same drugs to the sort of half-assembled, meandering vibe that works at the piano melody supported by the fragments of strings and guitar that really is quite beautiful in a subtle sort of way. When you take a look at the ramshackle juke jam that interpolates an R. Kelly melody, complete with an awkward pitch shifting and Justin Bieber sounding way too clear and a non-entity on the post-chorus, or Smoke Break with its harp-like flutter against an incredibly crisp cymbal, stumbling bass, horns, and turgid organ, you get the feeling that there's a foundation that's kind of missing to these songs. And that's before we get songs like Mixtape that really don't fit in with this album at all sonically. It goes with the trap snares and the dank atmosphere just doesn't really work. It doesn't fit in. Because this album does have a distinctive pseudo-gospel sound blended with hip-hop, and it's a weird interpretation too. Similar to the interpretation that Kanye tried on Ultralight Beam, it's a blend of clear, soulful vocals, horns pressed through various states of compression, and a whole ton of vocal effects warping them together into a malleable melody. And on some level, I get these choices. Synthesizing a gospel that can work in the modern hip-hop era. I can kind of dig that. It's defiantly unique. Now, songs like No Problem and Angel and both Blessing songs, they make it work. But overall, I don't know, I'm not sure the approach really clicks with me on a deeper level, and I think I understand why. I may not have covered a lot of gospel over the past couple of years, but much of what I have covered was organic. There was some grit and humanity to it, be it the post-punk noisy heresy of Algiers to the country touch finale of Southern Family that I covered this year. The power of that gospel came through in raw, imperfect humanity. And while you definitely get that in Chance's approach contorted through vocal effects, that imperfection, the pitch shifting and the auto-tune, it doesn't quite have the same organic swell and connection for me. Hell, even the moments that have the most power in this vein come through on both versions of Blessings. In the first case with Nico's trumpet reenacting the fall of Jericho with thunderous power, I really dug that. They're a really cool motif. And in the Reprise, taking the voices of Ty Dolla $ign, Rory, BJ the Chicago Kid, Anderson .Paak, and plenty more for the outro that, despite some auto-tune fragments around the edges, managed to blend the organic voices with real soul. It's a really great outro there. And yet, it was Anderson .Paak that I was thinking about throughout the majority of this album. And a comparison, because thematically, there are some parallels between Coloring Book and Anderson .Paak's album, Malibu. So why did Malibu connect with me so much stronger? Well, for one, the grooves are a lot better, and that there actually were some solid grooves, but there's also a weathered cohesion of that album that Coloring Book doesn't really have. It's a little bit too clean and kind of sloppy in spots. Again, it is better than Surf, and I do have to applaud this sort of oddball experimentation. You don't see it often in hip-hop these days, especially blending in gospel, but I would not really call this stronger than acid rap, mostly as it feels like, again, too many hands were in this pot. I get the impression that the bigger Chance becomes, the more assertive creative control he will have, and we'll get that bona fide classic from him eventually. But as it is for me right now, Coloring Book is a solid 7 out of 10 and a recommendation, especially if you're a fan of hip-hop or gospel music. Otherwise, you know what? There's a clumsy sort of soul that's impossible to fake, and I can definitely respect that. So you know what? Check this out. You probably won't regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. I've got a lot on my plate right now. Anything else, I've got the poll up here, so if you guys also want to tell me this is a bona fide classic right now, the poll's right there. I'd be happy to hear what you think. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.